welcome to another session of Our Lives, Our Tales. So I'll be speaking a little bit about Nazaria and why did we think of these sessions on Our Lives, Our Tales. So Nazaria is a queer feminist resource group, and we work mostly in Delhi, and we have been working since 2014. And so we work on issues of gender sexuality with a focus on queer women and trans persons. And we mostly do training and capacity building related workshops and sessions. We also have a helpline. We do casework related to queer women and trans persons, provide free mental health counseling to LGBTIQ people. So we have 2 part-time counselors with us who provide free counseling sessions. We do research and advocacy, and we align a lot with the feminist movement of the country. And yeah, that's what we do. So Our Lives, Our Tales is a oral history archiving project which we started in 2016. So Tarshi, which is a organization that works on gender sexuality, reproductive health rights, gave us some books, like some old books, and we could see the history, and the people working in Nazaria at that time said that we don't know much about the history of the queer movement. And the queer movement was limited to only talking about Section 377. Nas Foundation ka case hai, ya Section 377 hai, but nothing was talked about what was happening in terms of organizing at that time. So we thought, why not start some series? So earlier we had invited mostly speakers from Delhi because of lack of funds. Now, because of the lockdown, we could extend it to the entire country, and we could have people from different states. Last time we had Malubika and Akanksha from SEFO. This time we have 2 activists from Labia. One is part human and part feline, and one is a human creature, I suppose. And yeah. So to give an introduction of Chenika has been a lecturer of physics in most of her life, and a volunteer in urban efforts at claiming feminist, queer, and civil rights for another part of her life. And so she's been doing a lot of things and been part of various movements, not only the queer movement, but feminist movement, the progressive left movement. And she claims that she's too ancient, so to take her stories with a pinch of salt. And so Charles Mahajan is a writer, activist, and part feline and part human creature, a genderqueer person, and a queer feminist fellow who lives in Bombay, but mainly in their head. They have been guilty of starting a collective called Labia, a queer feminist LGBT collective, 2.5 years ago. If they knew that it would survive with them in it for so long, maybe they would have thought otherwise, but we really don't think so. So let's start with the discussions on Labia, and we'll open it up for discussions. But as of now, we have some questions that we would like to ask them. So people have been messaging me on WhatsApp, just 1 minute. They want the link because they forgot to register.
Hello Rutu, and hello Nazaria, and hello everyone else.
Yeah.
It's fun to be here.
We are so excited for you to see you be part of it. So I forgot the questions, but I have written it down somewhere. So we'd like to start with why did you think of starting Sri Sangam in the first place? And what was your idea behind the name Sri Sangam? And who were the people who were part of it? And what was the process like? And also basically the demographics, like who did you work with in the first place? lesbian, bisexual women, were trans people part of it, or if not, why? So we'd like to know about the history of labia, or no, Sri Sangam in the first place, and then we'll come to labia.
Yeah. Okay, so we are having this dispute amongst us about what story to tell. One of the things, I mean, I think Ritu, you made a nice error while speaking. Labia is not 2.5 years old, it's 25 years old.
25 years old, yes, yes.
So it's a long, long time. And we've had this joke going in labia all the time that coming out stories have been heard so often. There are friends who've been in labia for so long, and every time there is a coming out story session, they tell us that you're bored of your story, please tell a new story. And you're constantly battling with that. So I think with this session also, we are having a similar kind of battle, because there are many people who heard the story, who've been part of the story, who've been part of labia at different times, who are part of labia, or have been connected to it in multiple ways. I can see their names here. So we are trying to find a balance between the authentic story and the bits that we would like to add to it, right? So also I wanted to make one disclosure that I did not start Sri Sangam. I'm not guilty of having founding anything. I am very guilty of carrying it forward, but I'm definitely not founded anything. So let Charles do the story.
Fine, thank you. So as the guilty party has very much pointed out in the little bio note as well, this, as Chair says, this is a story often told, but I think that it is important to remember and kind of, it's fun in the retelling also as how, this group started. I think later it will come about more, but this is a very Bombay-based group. And I think the story of this group and even how it started has a lot to do with Bombay. And it has a lot to do with actually not just what happened in '95 when we started as a group, but also what happened before that. And Chainika will tell the story of more of that, what happened before and connect it to what happened later. But I think it's very crucial to mention that, two people at this point, Aarti and Sakina, who were there in Bombay and who were sort of the connecting point for lesbian women at that point, and queer was not part of our language in '95. And so they were in some ways that point of connect. And when through them a bunch of us connected with each other and felt they were just a room full of us, that's when the idea of having a group of our own sort of came about. So my part in it was that basically I was always somebody who didn't have any idea what I was going to do. So I sort of moved from one master's to the other. And in '94, I found myself, end of '94, back in Bombay. Wow, I could hear myself. Sorry. Completely at no idea what I wanted to do. But with very clearly, I'd done my first master's in Bombay and had somehow landed up in Louisville, Kentucky. Hadn't quite figured what I did there, but came back and with very much wanting to be here, but also very much wanting to find people I could talk to in the city. And before that, I always felt sort of, I was one of those quiet people who just didn't have people around me. So there was this interesting conference that happened, and I think it's important to talk about that also because it's something that always happens outside of us, right? So there was early Jan, there was a little note that came out in the newspaper that there was a gay conference that happened in SNDT, and there were some names which of course I didn't register, but one of them was Ashok Rao Kavi, the other was Shivananda Khan. So, there was a gay conference. So my, of course, whole head was like, oh my God, there was a gay conference in SNDT. So I just took myself, to to SNDT University and went to the Women's Studies department, because where else would I think that, you know, I could connect to? And I went there and met the director and said that, you know, there was a gay conference in your university, so why don't you put me in touch with those people? And the director was quite surprised and sort of quite taken aback. And she said, oh, I also read about in the papers. I said, how can that be? You know, you have to connect me. And I was pretty young and brash at that point. So I said, no, but you know, I'm a dyke and I need to meet other dykes and so on and so forth. But anyway, through that, I got some numbers and I called them, and then they kind of wanted to know why I was calling those numbers. Why did I want to be in touch with people, and are you a journalist and so on and so forth. Finally, I got hold of Aarti's number. And so I called her, and so I went to meet her, and she called me immediately over to me. And so I met Aarti and Sakina. And then through them, they also said that there are a few more people, you should meet them. And so with them, I met Leslie, I met Beena and Gomti, and there was one more person called Sarah. And so the first time when all of us were in this room, we suddenly looked at each other and were like, wow, none of us had been in a room in India full of queer people like us.
Full of only queer people.
Full of only queer people. Yeah, true. You must tell the story. And so, and in that sense, it was very funny, because also one of the things that Sakina did, I remember that very clearly when we met. She also said, you should come. There's a feminist group that I'm part of. Why don't you come? And you'll find people who think. So you might come and meet there. So before this meeting happened in Aarti Sakina's house, I also went to a Forum Against Oppression of Women, which has been around since 1980. 79. So, you know, that feminist collective, autonomous feminist collective, and I went there, and of course I met people there, and the usual sort of queer thing to do is like, okay, tell who do you think is and not, and of course, so Sakina sent me with this question, and I went there and I got the people right, but I mixed them all up. So, anyhow, so the thing was that I'd already started going there to Forum as well. And most of us were part of Forum. Leslie and I sort of went and were trying to figure out, but we were meeting all these fabulous feminists as well. But when we were in that room, and Aarti and Sakina had been, of course, part of Forum for a very long time. Beena and Gomti had been there for some time as well. But when we met in that room, in the small room in Aarti's house in Bandra at that point, and we just felt that we needed a group of our own. And while we had a feminist collective and we sort of liked it and loved it, there was something different about just the seven of us being in one space and wanting that, you know, and sort of just kind of, so immediately I think they had an old, really old desktop and one dot matrix printer. I remember we decided to write a mail. Then, because of course this is all pre-internet and pre-telephone, all of us, the only telephones we had access to were the phones inside our parents' houses. Otherwise, if we lived by ourselves, which very few of us did, you know, we didn't have any other phones. So I remember we wrote this letter and we decided that where can we go, figured out. Leslie was like, I know this shack in Aqsa, we'll go there. In Gorai Beach, we'll take that. So we just made copies of that letter and tried to send it through people to whoever. And a lot of those contacts were with Aarti. Sakina, excuse me, because, you know, that's how it was. So that letter went, and the only thing we said is that we'll meet at the Aqsa Jetty. And two of us will be wearing baseball caps, which was Les and me, because we were like the identifiable dykes, right? You know, so we kind of looked stuck out as sore thumbs, and which caused us enough problems otherwise. But we were like these strange people anyway, stuck out. So we were sort of wearing our baseball caps, and we had some time that we'll meet at that point. But I think we just hung around Aqsa for some like 3 hours before all the people who were supposed to come, we sort of figured they'd come. And, you know, when we recall that after again and again, we sometimes say there were 30 people, there were 50 people, there were like 18 people, all right? That's what the records say. But I'm pretty sure it was more than that, because in all our memories, it always feels like much more. And so, you know, we went there, and it was just fantastic. All of us were like, oh my God, you too, you too. And we all looked very different from each other. Most of us had never met each other. Some people knew each other a bit. So we talked and talked and talked. And so to come to the name Sri Sangam, why that name? It was hilarious. We had, and I still have that notebook somewhere, we have a couple of boxes of archives of labia. And so there's still one silly notebook which at some point says list of names. And it had all sorts of bizarre names, including somebody wanted Jhansi's brigade, somebody wanted Kajol's fan club, somebody wanted, what? Yeah. No, Kajol. This was after DDLJ, right? So there was what else? There's all sorts of hilarious names. I mean, because the one person in the group kept on saying Pachisu, Pachisu. So somebody's like, we should have a group called Pachisu. Then,
you know, for the Gujarati, non-Gujarati people, it means,
yeah, what
next? What next? So, you know, because it was just so overwhelming that there was this group. And there were also groups like names like Women on Women and all sorts of completely rotten puns that we could all think of. And between them, there was a name which I had suggested, which was Labia. And so I remember that very funnily, some of us especially, but especially a very young Leslie, and she was like 17, she's like, "She, aisa na, hum log aisa naam nahi rakh sakte." And I can just say that because, you know, she's such a wonderful friend. But the thing was that, so we all finally figured that we needed a name which people could write letters to or get mail from without feeling that it was something completely bizarre. So it needed to be neutral. It needed to be completely, like I could go to, I lived with my parents in Borivali then. I went to my post office and said, I need a PO box. So I said, I need a PO box for Sri Sangam, which is a women's writers group. It sounded very benign, something I could easily walk into a post box looking the way a post office looking the way I did and just get that. So I think Sri Sangam at that point came as this thing because we were very unsure and we were very scared. And the scare was at two levels. One was about people we wanted to reach to, that how would they know who we are? But at the same time, how would it be okay to receive something from a group called something really benign? But also within the group, a lot of people were extremely worried about how we would be known as. Very few people were comfortable with the idea of being out or being known as queer, as lesbian. And so that was, I think, very much part of it. And that remained for the first couple of years. More than that, you know, important concern. I mean, people were scared even to invite other people. Because what if that person knew me in some other context? So the kind of fear people had of being known as lesbian or bisexual. And yes, Sri Sangam, one of the first debates we had was whether this should be a group only for lesbian women or lesbian and bisexual women. And some of us were very clear about pushing and saying, no, it has to be for both. It cannot be, we are discriminated against, so we cannot discriminate, and so we have to have that. And so it was that lesbian and bisexual women. As far as trans goes, that was not part of our language. A lot of us who later identified and sort of call ourselves trans, including me, we were still struggling with the language of different women and all of that. But we were very clear that that was one of our main things. But that's how Sri Sangam sort of came about into being, and that's why Sri Sangam. It sort of made just more sense at that time.
Just to add a little bit to this, the portion before this, I think it's significant to say that every city has a different history with the women's movements and with progressive movements. And we must acknowledge that in Bombay, we've been kind of luckier than the rest of the spaces. That many of us found feminist spaces which were not exactly completely comfortable, but not completely rejection worthy either. And it is, I mean, it has been a journey even for a group like Forum, but it is a journey. It is something that the group has taken in its stride and evolved and changed and moved. And I think that that movement, because the group moved, that people stayed within, some people left, some people came back, but we've had that engagement with the feminist groups and that support from that group throughout, from the time that even when Sri Sangam got formed and it was trying to make space for itself, I think that strong links with Forum helped it in those initial years when we were so scared. And I remember when I came into Labia, I came into Sri Sangam, I was called by these guys who came. There were these three of them who came to invite the older women to the group. Because Aarti actually, and I must say this, that the space that Aarti was creating for people to be there, I think she wanted many other people to take that responsibility. She and Sakina had become this household which took the load of giving space to everybody. And she felt very relieved that now there were many others and there was a group which could share that responsibility. And I think that that's an important point why the group also came about and how everybody approached the group. But
पापा ने वो बनाया था नींबू पानी पापा करते हैं ना पापा
Sorry.
Right. Okay. So this so Aarti actually at this point in 95 decided that I have done enough. Now you people carry this forward. And so then these guys were there. There's always this tension in this collective of whether we want to be political or we want to be social. Whether we want to be just a social space where anybody and everybody is welcome, and because we recognize the need for such a space. But many of the people who were core to the group, for them, political action was very critical. That was very much a part of their being part of that space. And so then they were totally in a mess because they did not know how to now take this forward. And so they came asking for the senior members to come. And we, of course, were not invited in the first meeting, but then we were called later. And I did go to that meeting. And I remember going to the earlier Sri Sangam meetings and feeling very weird because it took me a while to understand that there was this whole hesitation of who can come for the meeting. And for me, it's very new because Forum was another collective space which was open to anybody. It never said that, you have to be a certain kind of a person to be part of Forum. Of course, groups don't remain like that is a separate story and we'll come to that, to the demographics. But the fact remained that here, the anxiety of being known and the anxiety of being outed, it was in the name, it was in the way that we functioned, but actually we found a good way out of it by working with Forum, working with, at that time, India Center for Human Rights and Law. So this kind of networking with those that are not seen as queer, making those connections and building those connections, I think that has been a very, very important part of our journey as a collective throughout in the last 25 years. Since Shaz also started the story of the fact that this city already had a presence of a gay group, which began a year earlier or 2 years earlier, that the gay spaces and the lesbian spaces were not separate before that. They were very much together. The dissonance that people were feeling vis-a-vis those spaces was also very much a part of it. So it's not like it was comfortable, but because there was no other queer space, and I think that was also part of the reason why a women's space was what was required as separate from the men's space. And that women's space, I think that the stress that it went through was continuously in the first 5-6 years, at least I know, It's been this, that whether this is a space which is open to everybody, for people to come and meet each other, for people to talk about their lives, or it is about changing the world around us. And I think we went through a lot of that clash all along in the first 5 years of our existence. So initially, of course, the people who came were mainly people who were already seeking out places. And so they were somewhere people like us, people who knew each other from some network or the other. And then we discovered that there were many networks in this city. There was an air hostess network. There was a sports people network. There were all these other networks that were working.
University networks. Those SMDT people.
So then there were friends who were, part of a class together, and then there were friends and they were all together. So all of this was also part of recognizing that there are queer people, there are lesbian women around, and but they are in different spaces. And to then create here, I think one of the biggest disasters was trying to create the social spaces actually. So we tried to organize parties. You would spend a lot of money and get everything together, and the party had to be in somebody's house. So we had to find firstly a person who would be willing to give their house big enough to actually have something like a party. And then we would find that we were the same old people who were there. No new people came there because the party would be at 7, 8 in the night and nobody would be there. And we did not understand, so we lost money in the process. We had to drink our own beer and drink our own whatever we could afford at that time.
Eat our own hummus and drink our own beer, basically.
So we were a disaster in terms of actually creating that social space. But then I think one of the couple of things that we did in the first 2 years was doing the 2 retreats. So we had the first national retreat, which we call a national retreat in Bombay, which was organized by Sri Sangam, and friends from across the country, mainly from Delhi. Few from Calcutta attended the second retreat, and there were Pune. But basically, wherever we knew people, those many people came for the first 2 retreats. The first one was very exhilarating because there were about 35, 40 of us who had met, and there are many new people in that. Those are very lovely memories that we carry with us. It was just, and the retreat, we didn't have agendas, obviously. We were just sitting, talking about our lives, talking about our plans, talking about who we are, what we do, and whatever interested us, essentially. It is, I think, one of those. So I feel very lucky because I feel that I've been part of two such moments of beginnings, peripherally, but nonetheless been there. When the women's movements and those groups started happening, there is a joy of that something starting. There's a joy of, we don't know where we're going, but we've decided to come together. And we're going to figure out, we're going to find a way through this. That joy of the women's groups and that joy of being part of Sri Sangam. I think they are comparable. They're very unique in their own ways. And that joy, I feel that, I'm sure that everybody who starts something new, who makes a new collective, feels that joy. I don't know if people, the other lesbians on this chat can say how it feels to come to an existing group. That's a different story. But to start something new with no blueprint whatsoever, with no idea where we're going, and to go ahead and make it. I think what Charles was saying in their intro, that that if I had known that this is where it will go, maybe I would not have thought of it. But when it started, then the thought was actually just let's have people here. And as we went along, then actually, because there's so much else happening in the country, and fire again, I think Malavika mentioned it last time, fire was a very important point because it brought the debate into the public eye. Whether we liked it or not, whether we wanted it or not, it brought the debate about lesbian lives into public eye. And that in Bombay, actually, when the film was being screened, there were 2 screenings for 2 or more screenings only for women. And these were these single screen halls which were like full of people, full of women. And I've not seen us meeting like that at that time. When, in the interval, everybody's sitting around in the aisles talking to each other. And it's not the usual kind of इंटरवल में सब लोग बाहर चले जाते हैं, ऐसा नहीं हो रहा है. सब वहां बैठे हैं, एक दूसरे से गप मार रहे हैं. It's a different sense to see women all over. And of course, by then, Sri Sangam had made one little parchi and put a story of
Pija and Bija.
The Vijayadanda story. A little pamphlet, we made a 4-page thing. And I was remembering Malvika. I wish there was somebody like Malvika standing outside who would have got that leaflet here. But we did. We gave it out in 2 shows, with the consecutive shows. We gave out those leaflets and we got letters. And we got letters back. So the same things that Sappho was talking about, that letters was one important way of communicating with each other. Post boxes was the only way that we could do it. Telephones were not happening because landlines were there. I had a house and I had a landline, and that landline went all over the place. You want to tell stories about that landline?
No, maybe Ritu has a question in between.
No, I was just thinking about this whole political versus social that composition, because in Delhi also, when we start something, there is always this distinction between, like, as long as I'm there, I'm very new to the movement, but this whole political versus social group is very difficult to maintain. Like, party करे तो कितने लोग आएंगे, या political discussion होगा तो कितने लोग आएंगे. वो political discussion वाले party वाले group को इतना importance नहीं देते, और party वाले group political वाले को इतना importance नहीं देते. So how do you actually think that has impacted street sangams versus or Lebia's work in that aspect? Because we see Lebia as a very political group, and you brought this issue, and I really remembered, like in Kashti, when initially it was very difficult to have a political discussion. There will be different set of people who will come. For party, there will be different set of people who will come, and it was quite evident.
Yeah.
So how do we? Yeah. How did you?
Yeah. Actually, it was, and I think one has to keep on reminding ourselves that in '95, you didn't have the other sort of party spaces and other spaces that have cropped up later, and you didn't have internet. So finally, if you have one set of people, then you want to reach out to as many people as you can, and also accommodate everybody. And also between us, it was very funny, because I will say this, around 96 and 97, in forum we were discussing in 95 and 96, there were very intense discussions on what is now known as gender just laws. There was a whole paper that forum did on talking about, because personal laws, this was post 92, 93, that had a big impact. That was part of the consciousness of many people. The debate of personal laws was very huge, right? And so whether there should be, the BJP and a lot of people were demanding the uniform civil code, which many feminist groups had also thought of as a good demand earlier, but also at this point of time in the 90s, late 90s, the question was that whether finally it's a good demand or not. So one of the things Forum was doing at that point is looking at different personal laws of different communities, and at the same time thinking about what gender justice in personal law would look like and how do we envision it. So we were having a lot of discussions. And even earlier, before that, when the Leela Urmila case had come in the 88, I think, 87, groups like Forum and others had taken a stand that they should be allowed to marry. So very much that same-sex couples were running away and getting married. That was the other thread. In the 90s and early itself, Sayatrika would start their late 90s. Sayatrika and early 2000s, Sayatrika would do their study on couples who were running away and committing suicide. And, that happened in Calcutta as well. And so this thing of same-sex couples running away wanting to marry was also a big issue. And so, in fact, there was a meeting of Sri Sangam, and some of us who were also part of Forum, and it was a varied bunch of people. I have to say, when Sri Sangam really started, we were a very varied bunch of people, and with very different interests. And I think that was also a point which made us think that what besides sexuality connects us? Because soon after sort of the euphoria sort of settles into that now we exist as a group, what do we do? because we're so different from each other with such different ideas and points of views, the question was that, what do we have in common? And slowly it took the next few years to reconfigure and figure that it is a politics and our beliefs and what we want to do is what we have in common besides sexuality, because, and also sexuality, because those also color how we see sexuality. So finally that, sort of consolidating of a politics was a slow process. We didn't start with the politics as such. But so I remember taking this, and I come from a very non-political sort of background. Come from English literature. The only feminism I knew about was what I'd read in novels and books. And so here I come to a forum as a group and people are discussing domestic violence laws and so on and so forth. And I just was completely sort of had a question mark at every meeting. But I wanted to take this discussion back. So I remember Beena and I were taking this discussion back to Stree Sangam and saying, you know what, there's this exciting thing happening. People are talking about gender just laws. And so they are redefining marriage and redefining partnerships. So shouldn't we be concerned and start talking about from how do we see it? And it was the strangest thing. Nobody, besides like a handful of us, the larger group did not want to talk about it. They were like, this has nothing to do with us. And which in retrospect one understands, because queer lives were so hidden, so invisible, that the fact that you could talk of rights of partnership at some point, it was just completely unthinkable, right? At the same time, you had people running away and getting married because they didn't know what else to do. So, or committing suicide together. It was a really sort of, so all those news reports were also there. So then some of us decided that we still need to work on this from a lesbian point of view. And then there was, also within forum, while it was feminist and great and wonderful, clearly on sexuality, there was not that kind of clarity that some of us had. So we couldn't work on this primarily as forum either, because, forum had a more larger women's point of view. So we were trying really hard how to do this. And so then there was a group of, I think 5 of us, who decided to work on this and say that what does gender justice in laws look like from our perspective? And if we are asking for that, and when we are talking about women's life, lesbian and bisexual women's lives, what do we talk about? And so then we wrote a paper, and there were these conferences at that point of time. There was a very huge human rights conference in 96. And so then that was the first time the 5 of us, and so the organizers were Forum, India Center for Human Rights Law Network, Kashtkari Sangatna, and some, like a lot of sort of broader groups like that. So there was one session which we had on, we called marginalized sexualities, and at that, we said lesbian, bisexual women, fine. I don't know.
Something LGBT.
LGBT.
Gay and lesbian.
Gay, lesbian, bisexual, something like that. So anyway, so we had a session on that, and I still remember it. There was, we were reading and we were giving this paper, some 5 of us presenting. And we were calling ourselves the Bombay group because we couldn't be either Stree Sangam, we couldn't be Forum.
So also we were not recognized enough to be given. Individuals can present them because they are recognized. We were not recognized. So we created a group called Bombay Group.
Yeah. And so we did that. And, in that space also there were some people who said, it's unnatural and so on and so forth. But there were other people from around. So what I'm saying is that you face that sort of thing even in activist spaces, larger human rights activist spaces. You also face that what is anything of this got to do with us in Stree Sangam, larger Stree Sangam. And so for the longest time that thing went on. Also there was no social space to meet. So till 2006, I think we were organizing parties. And there was, some people had this, Gay Bombay put in touch with somebody who owned a bar in Andheri. And so, Sunday afternoon, Sunday from 11 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock when the restaurant and bar was not used at all. That's the time we would have a party on Sundays so that people could come.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we would have a party so that everybody who had to go home to their parents at night could go there. Of course,
now also.
The rich and cool people who would hang out in places at night, of course, they didn't want to come to these parties, because for them it was like, who parties on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock? But for us, the other thing which Sri Sangam we were very clear about is we want to keep everything as affordable as possible. Most of us were really sort of ourselves struggling to make a living. Very few of us were living by ourselves, because many lived with parents or other households. Half and half. And so we were all living sort of, and so we were very clear about wanting to make everything very affordable to everybody. So, our parties would not be glamorous. Our parties would be something that, anybody could walk into. So, but I think till 2006 we did that, and then more and more other groups took that on, and it became for us that now we don't have to at least create party spaces. So, but meanwhile, we'd also started creating other social spaces, like film screenings and other things.
Yeah, so that's the line, that's the kind of way that we continue with the social spaces. But I think that the story of also us becoming this explicitly political collective is also interesting to mark, in the sense that although all this history of Sri Sangam from 95 to 2003, which is when we changed the name, I think that marks a decade for this collective, it marks a time period for this collective, where a certain kind of work was done and certain kind of groundwork was done. So there was a lot of, I'm remembering some of the things that Akanksha and Malavika spoke of last time. So, there is actually reaching out to people in distress. There is trying to find stories in the newspaper to follow them up. And I remember Beena going all the way to Bilaspur because there was a story in the newspaper about these two nurses, one of whom had said that she will not wear the women's uniform. She wanted to wear pant and shirt, and she wanted to keep her hair short, and she was losing her job. And these two women have again got married, like Leela and Urmila, they had also gotten married. There was a story, and that newspaper story was picked up and followed up. Similarly, there were stories from Maharashtra, from the interiors of Maharashtra, that were found, followed up. People went, actually found those people. Some of them are still in touch with us. So there was that kind of outreach. Besides that, letters were one big way of reaching, and like Sappho mentioned last time, the letter coming from Calcutta to Bombay, going back to Calcutta and putting people together. So I think that there is a sense of pre-internet when social could not be avoided. That if you were a group, you had to do all of this. We started scripts at that time because we were tired of writing letters. It was the same thing. What do you write every time? Somebody writes you, you write back, then they write again, and then they send you pictures of their girlfriend, and they send you pictures of themselves dressed in various ways, and you don't know what to do with it because you don't know what is it that you are expected to write to them after this. So then all the nerds that are sitting here think that, oh, let's send them all the writing that we like. So we decided to make scripts, and if you look at the first issue of scripts, which is like totally lift from here, there and everywhere, it has all what we like to read, we think everybody will like to read. So we were so stupid. I mean, we put it together and we sent it out, and we send it out as a, okay, now you've written to me, I've written to you 2 times, next time I'm sending you a copy of scripts. And I think that those people stopped writing after that. So, but there were correspondence. We had one correspondence I remember from Orissa. There was this married woman who used to regularly write. Then there was, after fire, we got a letter from some 8 women who were all in relationships with each other and they lived somewhere. So there were interesting stories that came. There were lots of dirty letters from men that came, which we had to then mark those addresses and say that it's not to be entertained after this, and those deserve a different file, and so on and so forth. So all of that was happening. At the same time, I think from 95 to 2002, while we were doing this kind of social work, a social space creation, we were also creating space within the political spaces here. So, this meeting that Charles is mentioning about in 96, that was followed up with a meeting to talk about lesbian, gay, bisexual people's legal rights. And that was again organized with Forum, with India Center, with Council Club, which Malavika mentioned from Calcutta, and Sri Sangam. And Sri Sangam. So with all of us got together to talk about what are our legal rights, which is the time at which Naz went and filed that case. The first challenge was filed to 377. So it is all of these. From there, the Hamjinsi booklet came out, right? Then the book that Veena edited. So we were creating, and the phone line, actually, then we decided that we can't do it from homes. So our logic was that we never wanted to set up an organization. We can come back and talk about it more. What does this collective and working like this means? But because we did not want to set up an organization, we spoke to other organizations that they lend their infrastructure for what we wanted to do over there. So the first phone line that came in Bombay came in India Center for Human Rights and Law. It came under the name Achal. It was conceived of, thought of in Labia and in Sri Sangam, and then Geeta took it and went ahead with it. Achal and Geeta stayed in India Center for some time, then they left, and then India Center set up another phone line, which was Hamjinsi, which was then collaborative effort between Sri Sangam and India Center. So we tried to use this constantly. I think we used a special cell like this all along. We used Forum like that all along, and they've always cooperated. So these groups, some of these groups, I think
Awaz in Iswa.
Awaz in Iswa was another one. So we really need to say that a lot of these political spaces which have worked with us to build on their politics and have also helped us, because without their support, we could not have survived, especially the first 7-8 years that we survived in the city. We used to go, two women were caught because the mother saw the usual story. One mother saw the letter that she had written, or diary that she had written, and then the mother threatened with 377. And so then these people went to Forum. Forum, of course, sent them to us. And then now we are trying to find out. So then these girls were taken away and they were kept somewhere else and whatever. And then we had to go and get a saman. And we had to go late in the night. I don't know why we had to go late in the night, but we went at 10 o'clock in the night. I remember that. And we went to this mother's house, the oldest amongst us, which is Sakina and me. And Shaz remembering we had grey hair. We did not have grey hair then. Both of us went to meet the mother because we looked respectable enough. We wore our salwar kurtas and went to meet the mother to convince her that your daughter is, whatever she's doing, it's all right, without telling her that we ourselves are doing it. We said that we are part of this women's group, and she came to us and whatever. And that woman, but she allowed us to take the saman. We took the saman in the night and came. But it was heart-rending because she had taken every single piece of clothing that woman had and had ripped it down the center. It could not be worn again. She had a whole collection of audio cassettes and she had pulled out each and every one of them. So that was completely in the ruin, but she kept it there. And we picked all that up in the middle of the night, 12 o'clock, I remember, trying to get into the train or something with all that and move from one suburb of Bombay on one railway line to another suburb of Bombay on another railway line. So there were many such instances that were informing us about people who were not like us. So although in the collective, we did not have people who were different from us, but we were constantly in touch with people who were different from us. And we can talk about what that interaction has been.
Yeah, it's actually you have yourself touched upon the issue of what you did in the initial days, like outreach and writing letters, then scripts came up. So basically, we also would like to know about the kind of response you got from the other gay groups in the city or in the country. Did you get any support? Or if yes, what kind of support? If not, why? And also challenges that you faced while like carrying out the work, internal challenges and also external challenges.
I think clearly from the very beginning, I think we had an inkling of what kind of groups we could work with more collectively. And, for example, even the 96 conference that, from which Hum Jinsi came out, 97, was with the Council Club in Calcutta.
Calcutta.
Yeah, and not any other group in Bombay. And clearly, I mean, the city has lived through 92, 93. And the feminist groups and our friends who were there and know that. And, all of us sort of inherit that history also. So, what kind of work can be done with who was very clear. But I think what we did from the very beginning was get in touch with other groups that were forming. Even the groups that had been there earlier, Sakhi, for example, I know that not all of us were in touch, but I think Leslie had been in touch with Geeti and then later with Kat. And actually, Geeti had sent a lot of her artwork and letters to Leslie also. So it was that, there was this being in touch with other people was very much part of what we wanted to do. In fact, we would sit and write a lot of letters. And, at that point, this is just because it's a personal favorite point and not so connected to your question. But I want to talk about, in those 90s, one of the things we were really starved of was books. Okay. Really, really starved. So we thought of this lovely idea and sent off letters to a lot of the presses, the lesbian and feminist presses that were running in UK, US, and other places. So we went, and we didn't send them to these big sort of, theory presses. We wanted like fiction, right? So we wrote to Firebrand Books, the ones who published Dykes to Watch Out For. We send it to Nayad Press. We send them to New Victoria Publishers. What is Sphinx? And there was one more in UK. So we just sent off letters and we said, we'll review books, we'll do whatever. We are this group that has just started. People send us books. And so one of the things we actually really did was collect books. And as part of it, so we got all these lovely books. And then, so another of the things we were doing is trying to collaborate with feminist libraries in the city to put our books and lesbian books out there, so that they could read those people, other people like us who would end up in feminist places could at least read those books, right? So because several of us sort of had found characters like ourselves or, had anything about lesbian sexuality first in books rather than in real life. And so for many of us, this was also like, if people come looking, let's do this.
But to come back to your question, Ritu, so when we began, actually, we did work a lot with Humsafar also. Bombay Dost was, I mean, the letters that came to Bombay Dost were directed to Sri Sangam from women. The letters from women that came to Bombay Dost were sent to Sri Sangam. Sri Sangam was given an offer to take 4 pages in Bombay Dost and use that for as our pages. We chose not to do it even then, and I say this also because we've looked back at the history for when we were doing our 20-year recounting of history. We did look back to many of those correspondences and meeting minutes, and we recognized that there was a slight discomfort with the whole magazine, which we felt that our voice would get drowned in it, and that's why we came up with scripts. So I think that there have been many efforts, and it's not only in 95, 96. From 95, 96 till way into the 2000s, I think we've tried to work hard with the local groups, because there are all kinds of groups in the city, and all of us know that every city has its own history of what kind of queer organizing has happened. So we have the oldest gay group here. We have very big Hijra Gharanas here, and we have very big leaders from the Hijra community also here. So we've tried working with all of them, and we've tried working with the progressive groups. Let's put it like this: our success with the progressive groups is much better. We continue to work with them, we continue to push the politics. We continue to fight with them as well. But with the queer groups, with the LGBT groups, our work has not been
In the city.
In this city. It has not been as smooth, and so we've actually then also worked hard to build connections outside the city. And so that's why, I mean, that getting Council Club in was a step to make that connection. To move in 2001, I think we were looking at sexual assault laws, and there were a lot of groups. So then Sangama was very involved, and we know the histories of queer groups. We know that some that are seen very close and politically aligned to us. At some point, when we feel that no, this is not working out, we move away. And I think that is a journey. I think all interactions with collectives, organizations is a journey, which at times has worked, at times has not worked, and in some cases there have been a complete rupture made by us because we did not want to continue that. In some cases, we managed to build some sort of a balance. So I don't think that we should. I think we leave it at that.
But we've had very wonderful and very intense connections with queer groups all around the country. Especially LBT groups, Lesbos, Yatrika, Safo, Vikalp, when Kashti was being formed, before that, Prism, whenever these various groups, and, then Hits in Hyderabad later, and, so, it was that when groups were coming, there was a lot of conversation, and I think that has remained, that connect has remained till date. And it has deepened. In fact, the more and more people one finds now, that I think as time has changed, as how all of us function has changed, I think the connections with more and more people, as the things we talk about get more nuanced and intense, and lots of new things keep on coming up. I think that those connections have gone intense, and which to me also points that the history of Labia, Sri Sangam, has also been a history of questioning our ideas, giving up on some, keeping some, and moving to other ideas. It's never been a fixed sort of thing as well.
So I'll stop in a while, but I have a few questions before that. Is that how did the journey from Sri Sangam to Labia and LBT Queer Collective happen? And it is very important for us, for you also, for us also to know that history.
So actually, what Shaz was saying earlier, that we've not had a blueprint, and we've kept on transforming ourselves as we went along. The transformations have happened because that's the demand. That's the demand from the outside and from inside, both. It's never been only the outside that has decided what we will do. But in 2002, when Gujarat happened, I think for a year, we had no Labia meeting as such, no Sri Sangam meeting as such. But most of us who were active in Sri Sangam at that point were very active in all the work that happened in Gujarat. And I remember the first meeting after we had kind of withdrawn a little bit from that whole experience. The first meeting that we called, we had about 15, 18 people. It was in Awaz Niswa office, because Awaz Niswa had an office by then, and that was one of our spaces. We met there, and it was obviously that we were meeting after a year or so, and as a collective we were meeting after a year or so, and then we said that, bhai, ye naam na bahut boring ho gaya hai. The same concerns that were there while choosing the name were becoming a burden for us by this time, because we're feeling that you cannot stay hidden, you cannot stay in this secure space. The right wing outside demands that you be more open. You be more open and take them on. So whatever little ways that we could take them on, we decided that we will change our names, and our name should indicate who we are. And so, of course, Charles had kept that name in mind, Labia in mind, from 95 till 2002. And they suggested, oh, like this told now that there were many names and this was one of them. And it just so happened that the group that was present in that room at that point felt that this was a very good name and we should stick to it. And by the time we reached home that night, I remember we were like, hey, yaar, but this is only lesbians and bisexuals. What happens to trans people? So we already started the language, but we didn't know how to say it. So then we said, acha, we will, we tried to put a T somewhere, wanted to make it Laptia and whatnot, and it didn't work out. So we said, no, we will leave it lesbians and bisexuals in action. In our description, we'll start speaking about gender as well. So that's how lesbians and bisexuals in action came about. This was 2003. As we went along, as many of you know that in 2008, 9, in 2009, we did the study on gender, right? And so the engagement of why we did the study is something that stays with us. And again, when we look back, we realize that the first campaign that Stree Sangam did in 95, it got formed in April. And the first letter to the editor that we wrote was about one of our members being beaten up in the women's compartment because she did not look like a woman. And that was our first letter. So it has been a concern. It has been a concern because we have members who've been uncomfortable in women's spaces. The language of how do we talk about them other than just calling them different women came to us later. So we were trying to explore this and understand gender more. That's when we started the study in 2009. And by the time the study was ready, we felt we can't keep lesbians and bisexuals in action. It is not a name that many of us can, connect to in any way. But we wanted to keep the reference to the name. So we decided to call ourselves Labia, a queer feminist LBT collective. Which is like, a mouthful in itself. And people don't know whether it's the full name or it's the descriptor, but that's the name now. And already we've been talking about whether we want to drop the labia now and come up with something else. Because that is what describes us. Stree Sangam described us in 95. Lesbians and bisexuals in action described the majority of us in 2003. In 2013, Labia Queer Feminist LBT collective defined us. I think by 2020, if we survive after this, then we will think of another name, maybe, or we'll try another way of talking about ourselves. So this transformation that we keep doing for ourselves, also the second decision that was taken in that meeting is very critical. That by then there were other social spaces that had come up. And we felt that we have to now, because many of us are wanting to do only political work. Let us be open about it. Let us say we are a political space. If we do social space creation, that's a separate thing. We will try and do that, but that's not our main focus. Our main focus is then political work. So that, and we're not shying away from articulating our politics. That's the decision that we took in 2003. Which meant, I don't think that any of the people who were there at that time, we were all in consensus. So it was not, by then the distilling had happened, I guess. That people who did not fit into this had already moved and found other spaces for themselves.
I think Gujarat was a big marker in our personal lives in that sense, and political lives.
So the study that you did on gender and study that you did on gender, and we started using the coin called female assigned, persons assigned female gender at birth. You all started using it, and I just started thinking of that category and the debates that have come up surrounding that category. How do you describe it now in Labia? What has happened? Because in Nazariya, earlier it was queer woman and trans persons assigned female gender at birth. Now we call queer women and trans persons of all spectrum. So LBT meetings are very inclusive of trans persons of all spectrum. So, like, where does labia stand in it, and how did this person's assigned gender female at birth become important for you guys, and how you, yeah, because we started using it extensively in our work as well.
So actually, you know, when we started to do the study, and I think it's sort of that study to me also, you know, like Gujarat was that moment which defined the group. I think the study also sort of defines what kind of a group labia is or has been, you know, at different points of time. We decided to do it as a group because we just wanted to understand gender. Many of us were talking about it. All of us were actually so much talking about it. We were like, sexuality is sorted out, you know, gender is what we really need to talk about. We have to get this thing, you know. So there were a lot of personal questions, a lot of political questions, and we were really like bored with sexuality, you might say, at some level, because labia also, okay, maybe not that way bored, yeah, but like, okay, you know, we've talked about it. We don't have anything which is sort of exciting about it, but gender was really something we were all putting our heads together to. And so we started with talking about what we want to do, and we started it by sort of reading a lot and sharing a lot of reading a lot, talking all night, sitting up and talking. And so finally we were like, we started with the idea, first we'll talk to trans people. Then we were like, who is trans? And then this whole question, which has always been a question in any group in India, especially in the 90s, but later also, which, you know, many people have written about, that when you don't have words in your language, then, you know, what words do you use to describe yourself? How do you talk about yourself in your life? Which was also a question of lesbian, because one of the first things told to us was lesbian is a Western import, right? You've lived through that as well. So, you know, you're like, okay, so trans only makes sense when you have the language of trans, when you're using that. Otherwise, you're not using that language. Does that mean that that person who doesn't say that, because self-identification doesn't work here? So then we were like, okay, we're talking to queer people. Then we're like, queer people is too huge a target. You know, then who are we talking to? So we are talking to, we went through this whole process. Then what we did was we decided to do a round between ourselves that, do I think I will be part of the study or not? And so some of us, when we were using the word trans and saying we'll do that, and some of us said yes, and some people said no. Then we started making a questionnaire while having these discussions. And the more we made it, the more we felt that it is how we live our gender and negotiate it. That really, and how do we express it, negotiate it, what is our gendered life? That is what is the focus of this study. And so as we do that, for us to assume anybody's gender would be wrong. So the only thing we actually know is what gender people have been assigned. We don't know what gender people are saying are, because we have not asked this question even for each one of us. The first time it gets asked is also for those of us who are anyway feeling different, right? So then this understanding that we cannot assume a gender, but we have to, the only thing we know is, and so we're like, okay, we don't want to talk to people assigned male at birth right now, because we have to limit the focus of our study somewhere. And so that was the first time then we got into this whole thing of that we cannot say anybody's gender. The only thing we know is what gender has been given to them, but we don't know what. So this is where it comes from.
But we, I think in labia, we have been, since we became LVT, and which was very early in life, for us, T was all T. All trans persons could be part of labia. That's been our position, and in that sense, we've been slightly different from how Nazaria was or Sappho was in the earlier years. We didn't have in this, when we say LBT, we did not mean, we meant lesbian, bisexual women and trans persons. We did not ever say that this would be a space for only those assigned female at birth. That was not the description of the collective ever. So the collective has been open, although most people have been people who were in the earlier years were people who were assigned female at birth. The language, I'm trying to also respond to the second part of your question, that that this term has become kind of contested now, that whether you would use this, and I don't think any of us use it as an identity. We use it as a descriptor. As a descriptor, when we want to distinguish, when we want to, for a particular reason, we want to distinguish a set of people. When we use it as a descriptor for them, that's about it. Because identity, we all understand, is something that the individual chooses. And I or anybody is, nobody to tell what your identity is. So all these clarities, of course, are of the last decade. These clarities were not there before that with many of us. And we acknowledge it, all of us. That I think last time Malavika also acknowledged their journey with gender, and I'm sure that all of us have had our journeys in trying to get the right language. We live in a world which is so binary that it's extremely difficult to find that right balance between the language that will be understood and the language that we would like to use. So I think for us, that what Charles is saying, that was a turning moment, was because somewhere this clarity of what we were struggling with, the battle of gender, was getting clearer in the study. And I think that has helped us to do the political articulation of gender. Individual understanding of gender people have, but the political articulation of gender in the ways that we have been doing in the last 10, 12 years has shifted from how we did even in the early 2000s. Absolutely. So and it's not like we've not worked with trans people in early 2000s or from early 2000s we worked with Hijra communities, we worked with all of them. But the language and politics of gender that we articulate after in the last decade is slightly different.
And which has also been shifting slowly and surely. So yeah.
So I'll end it here for me. I'll have some concluding comments and questions, but it is so I'll open it up for the audience, and people have already spoken about, like for instance, Dhamini has said that what were some of the thoughts of the Bombay group had over gender just laws for lesbians. Mm-hmm. You still have the document, Charles and Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have the document, and we have a subsequent paper that Srisangam wrote in Hamjinsi after that, which is specifically on law. But the first document is also there, and we can share it with Dhamini.
Yeah, but would you like to share, like, what?
Who remembers?
Were the thoughts?
Wow.
I am ancient, I don't remember.
So am I. No, really. I mean, I think that one of the things when we started looking at, I don't remember what exactly was in that paper, but clearly 377 was something that we knew. But I think when we come to 97 and that, first national meet to strategize on LGBT rights, when that happens, I think from that we'd come out with some very actually clear clarity.
That is all documented in Hamjinsi, everybody read it.
But I can't remember that.
I think the first paper was more like, in the early feminist movements, we said women's rights are human rights, right? I think this paper was trying to do something like that. That lesbian, gay, bisexual people's rights are human rights. It is at that basic level trying to say that we exist, we are human, please recognize us. And also at that point, we used a lot of stories of the nature of violence, Subsequently, we went on and we said, Bhaiya, we don't want to do violent stories. And there again, we differ from Sappho. We decided कि हमको नहीं violence के बारे में बात करना है, क्योंकि हमको ज़्यादा हमारी जिंदगी में violence के अलावा और क्या है. That is what we want to talk about. Not that there is no violence, there is immense violence, but we don't want to get caught in that narrative which the women's movement also got caught in, कि कितनी हमारी जिंदगी दूभर है. वो एक narrative है, but we decided that we will try to bypass it with more fun, more humor, more creativity, more wackiness, more queerness, if you would like to use that word. So I think that we've kind of gone on and on about trying not to say how oppressed we are, but trying to say how being queer allows you to be different.
And also critiquing what is not good. Critiquing the norm. Chanika, why do you keep on going out of the frame? Is it like this or like this? How does it work? Huh.
हाँ.
I forgot what I was saying.
Critiquing.
Critiquing what is not queer.
Yeah, so I think that is also something very early on we decided. We sort of, that people tell us about your lives, and I think we started reacting to that very early on. We're like, fuck you, we're not going to tell you about our lives. We're not on exhibition here. We are going to tell you that what you think and why you think that is a problem. And so, there was always this attempt to say that. So I think after the first few years, we literally decided that we don't want to do these narratives of people. That, yes, we know people live very difficult lives and we will bring the resources. But when we want people to question and think, we want them to think that what does this kind of structure mean? Not just that how it oppresses us, but how the structure is leaving out people and why the structure is problematic. I think that was one of the shifts that was very strong within our how we want to
the extent that at one point Georgie, who was a journalist, in-house journalist, once came very seriously and said, hey, yeah, that person wants a couple photo. Yeah, Jay and Charles, will you give? Charles said, you and I will give a photo. And she said, but we are not a couple. She said, anybody can be a couple. Who knows who's a couple? Who knows who are these lesbian women? Any two people can sit and say that we are a lesbian couple. Let's make it. Which didn't go down well with Georgie, but
couple वाले तो अभी भी आते हैं.
हम क्यों नहीं करते ऐसा? हम कोई भी दो लोग बैठ जाते हैं कि हम couple हैं. किसको फर्क पड़ा? Anyway, we don't know who are couples, right? So might as well let it be open.
Lesbian woman के लिए तो coupledom के बाहर कुछ है ही नहीं, it seems. But नहीं, ये journalist wants that only from us. Couple. So we stopped giving interviews as couples. We'll not give interviews as couples. You want our life? We will talk about our lives, but not as a couple. But there's someone called Sakshi Rai who wants to know about your engagement with Lawyers Collective during the first and the second petition and 377 and your legal movement and the shortcomings.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a very tiny story and then Charika can tell the story, the detail. But I think 2001 is when they filed it, right? So I remember there was this meeting happening at one of the places where we did a lot of meetings, JJ Nursing Home Association, whatever, at Aksa Beach. Basically, a lot of us had a lot of meetings and we had our retreats and things like that there. So this was a meeting on sexual assault laws. Okay, and the meeting was happening, and this was a sexual assault laws with women's groups, child rights groups, and queer groups together. So this was the first time and from different parts of the country. So there were many of us sitting there really trying to think about sexual assault laws, because you remember this is also after the what's it called, the Sakshi case. The Sakshi case had happened in the Supreme Court
on child sexual abuse.
On child sexual abuse. So actually,
in 1997.
Yeah. So what had happened was also that when we did our very first petition as Sangam against 377, we actually had a clause even then during the Ranchi conference. I remember we were doing the signature campaign, where we said that since this is the only law used for child sexual abuse, we need a separate law for child sexual abuse. So in fact, very early, that how these three groups of people need to work together on sexual assault laws was very much on. And so 377 was part of the sexual assault laws. And so we're like, anybody who talks about that should talk about this. And we should also be as concerned about sexual assault and child sexual abuse. So that was the meeting happening. And I think a friend of ours who's working with the Lawyers Collective, Alok.
Everybody's names you're taking.
So Alok was working and as an intern, and he came very excited. Guys, we filed the case. And all of us like, what was your prayer? How could you do it without talking to people?
The thing was that where was the community consultation?
Yeah.
Before doing this, what is the point of all this discussion if somebody goes ahead and files the case? But that's the very, very old story we like to forget. But the
real stories later.
The story with Lois Collective is Lois Collective has always again been an ally in Bombay. I mean, in our list, we've written down names, and Lois Collective is very much the ally that we've worked with all along. This case, I think that initial critique that we had of, the initial prayers that were there, the initial arguments that were there, from there till when Voices came in, there has been a huge journey, and I think Lois Collective again is one of those groups that took that criticism positively on board and actually went ahead with doing community consultations after that consistently right down till 2018. So it is, I think that is what I mean by the working with collectives which actually respond to your criticism. That the criticism does not go waste. It is something that helps us build that relationship further. So that's how I recognize, as Labia, we would like to recognize Lois Collective and Labia's relationship. So there have been points when we've had differences, but they've been our ally all along. And the battle for 377, I think, and I would say it with full awareness that, and this is my personal opinion, I think that if Lois Collective was not involved in that case at that point, maybe the scene today would be very different. I think it is this openness on Lois Collective part to open it out to various people that it gave us a platform to come together. Then came Voices and then came ALF and everybody else. But we have to recognize that without Lois Collective, which was not only a queer organization, without them, this coming together of queer collectives and organizations across the country that we see today, we feel has been there forever, would not have happened. Yeah. We were still not able to do that. And if there was any other group, they could have very well said that NAS came to us, we filed it, and we're going ahead. Right? It was fair enough, and we see many people doing it even now. But they chose to open it out to everybody. They chose to take everyone on board. They chose to talk to everyone. And so that is something that we do recognize as a very important, valuable contribution to queer organizing in the country.
Absolutely. I was just going to add, because the kind of meetings they organize.
They also have been negotiators for us in this city in trying to organize joint demonstrations. And I can tell you one demonstration we had in Lois Collective, because we were such warring factions that were trying to hold the demonstration together, that we had to have a neutral space, and Lois Collective was that neutral space, and Anand Grover was the person who sat through all our meetings trying to keep us calm and make the demonstration happen. So
yeah, they've been incredible. They've been quite amazing.
I was looking through some of the mails. I don't know, like very old mails, and 2009 के judgment से पहले Lois Collective के साथ एक meeting हुआ था. तो वो mail निकला मेरे mail में, and Voices का, and then I was reading that mail and the memorandum that we wrote about one negative porcha and one positive porcha, and it was so many memories that came up about Lois Collective involvement and also the kind of things that they have been doing. Okay, how have you managed to stay alive for 25 years? DT asks. How did you manage to attract newer members? What are the challenges have you faced in the process?
I knew DT is going to ask this.
I think your answer of that queer time was very good and appropriate here.
So,
okay, this is the question we discussed, all right? So we have an answer.
We knew DT will ask this. The thing is actually how you survive for 25 years is, and I think Shaz is honest in saying that I did not know that we would survive for 25 years. ना अगर हमको वो long term ever after वाला scene कभी भी होगा तो हम survive नहीं कर पाएंगे, ये हम जानते हैं, right? This is the reality of queer lives, that we don't have an ever after picture of our life. We have a now in the moment picture of our life, and I think this collective has kind of worked with that. It has worked with the rhythms of, what we now call queer time and queer
taking from crypt time.
Yeah. So the language of queer time and queer rhythms that each of our lives has, that has shaped the collective. So the collective has long periods when it's been dormant. The collective has long periods when it's been super active. It oscillates from being absolutely working wonderfully all together to actually not wanting to talk to each other. So I don't think that we have any sort of stability in this. The and I've been part of two collectives. Right? I've been part of the Forum Against Oppression of Women for now 40 years, and this collective for 25 years. I think there's a difference in the two. The feminist collective still responds to needs from outside, and I think most political groups would do that. That what happens outside, they have to respond to each and everything. I think the rhythm that this collective has acquired, and I'm not putting any value on either of them, but the rhythm that this collective has acquired is that we will respond to our inner needs. We will respond to what we can respond to. We will not get pushed by everything that needs to be done. And I'm sure that many ladies are shaking their heads that you are the one who pushes us all the time. But I recognize this and push a little क्योंकि थोड़ा धक्का तो बनता है. That's my contribution. But I am very happy to say that it does not succeed. It does not succeed if people are not involved. And I think collectives function and survive only if people want them to survive. That's the thing of a voluntary collective. Otherwise, it does not need to exist. There is no accountability to anybody. We have no money to return. We have now no office to return. We have nothing. We can just say we are shut and we are shut and finished. And so our accountability is only to ourselves. And I think that it can be taken as a big load. It can be taken as a, life itself is a big load if you think of your whole life. But if you think of the present, it is this moment that we have to look at, be honest to that moment as far as we can be. I think that's what we've tried to do. Probably that's how I would like to describe it. It's not as if we've had lots of coming and going. When we did the 20 years and we called people on stage, we were surprised at the number of people who came on stage, right? So different people have come, gone. Some have left because they did not like to work with us. Some left because they found love elsewhere. Some left because they had disputes with people here. Some left because they had breakups here. So various, and some came because of relationships. So many permutations and combinations have happened. People have come to the city for 2 years and stayed in this collective, been very much a part of it, moved away, they are somewhere else and still they are a part of the collective. And I think that this lockdown is teaching us how to, in the same city, we are not able to meet. In the same city, it's like 5 kilometers away from each other and we haven't met. But still we try to do things collectively in this moment. So I think that now we'll have new meanings to how to do this collective work and to how to involve all the people who I can see here who are not living in Bombay, who are from Libya and who are scattered all over. How do we bring that energy together?
The other thing I just want to add to it is that, when people come and go, I think the other fun thing that's happened with the group is that what we do changes with the people. And so, sometimes like when you had a lot of people interested in film, we were doing film screenings regularly. I mean, and endless debates on what films should be shown, should be not shown. And, it was part of creating that social space, but we wanted to do it via film. And incredible films have been shown one per month for years on end. Similarly, there was a point when there were a lot of people who wanted to create music. So we were creating all sorts of wacky songs one after the other. So, there is that, different people bring different energy in and it sort of does that. And so it's circumstances, but it's also very much who's there in the collective that defines the energy of the collective. So, it's a very sort of...
Paushali asks.
I'm very much interested in the social political distinction you drew. Don't you think there is a tension now also between the demand for labor to be a social and political space? Though we know
There we all know there are many queer groups, many digital spaces.
I think that tension will never go. That tension will never go. So, but the thing is that we recognize what we can do and what we can't do. That the creation of a party-like space is something that we can't do. But we do create spaces where people who don't completely understand our politics or share that language or share that politics in the way that we, those of us who meet regularly can talk about it. We do create spaces where we can extend that to other people who have been connected to us. So we've had meetings like last year, was it? No. Yeah, last January before the march in Bombay. We called all the people who've been writing to us, who've been, we've been in touch with, and we had a 2-day meeting with them. We walked the march with them. So
And we saw एक लड़की को देखा था ऐसा लगा together.
Yes.
Which was quite a fabulous moment.
So yeah, so we do try and do that. We do try and keep the space open for as many people as we can. But finally, a collective like this then becomes a collective of people who are similar in some sense.
Which is a problem.
Yeah. In terms of demographics, to come back again, we have variations in age, we have variations in genders, etc., etc.
And
But
job.
we don't have that much variation in in our class positions, in our caste positions. I mean, this is something that again, voluntary collectives are only for the privileged, right? That to have the time to be able to give time for something beyond survival of one's own, beyond earning, beyond taking care of everybody that I'm supposed to take care of, to find time to do this. I have to be a privileged person. I can't do it without that.
Vikuram has a question.
Yes. What do you find?
They can only ask me.
Yeah, why don't you ask it? Actually, that'd be really nice. Vikram, you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Hi.
Hi.
This has been an amazing conversation. I also just the intimacy of it and the fact that you're sitting next to the balcony reminds me of when we spent time together in the house. Almost got teary-eyed a little.
Oh,
I miss you both a lot. I was just wondering what you feel is different about organizing back then. Say even with Queer Time, say the fact that people did have more permanence in jobs, that housing was still something that could be found in the city and so on and so forth, versus say when in times now we have precarity with regards to no income, you have a kind of distracted neoliberal public sphere plus fascism like never before. So I was wondering if there are any, because you continue to do organizing work, if there are any differences and what are the ways in which you cope with those differences.
So actually, it is true. It is true that in the last 25 years, vulnerabilities of various kinds increased. Even for the people who could manage something in the mid 90s, it's more difficult today. The housing scene in Bombay has always been bad, actually. And now, but people have not been able to buy houses in the city for the last 30 years. And there is no rental housing really available to people. So yes, housing has been an issue for a long time. It becomes absolutely impossible for anybody to be able to buy a house, and there is no concept of renting in Bombay city. So it is, and I think a lot of people have left the city also because it's very expensive to live in it. And the jobs do not pay enough. So it has meant that we've lost people. We've lost people because they go to other cities where it's slightly more manageable, and maybe we are losing from there as well because they're moving to somewhere else. So I totally see the difference in what kind of volunteer work was possible then and what can be possible today. But I also see a lot of, that we need to recognize various ways in which people are doing this work now. And I'm totally fascinated by the amount of work that people do on the internet. At their pace and time, not requiring too many resources, but still continue to do it. I find that very, very exciting about the new medium as much as, there are the problems of the new medium. But that the internet is a space which works on a lot of volunteerism and a lot of work that people are putting in continuously, which helps groups like us. That you know that debate, the ongoing debate in these spaces, probably helps groups like us to rethink many of our things. The viciousness in the way that the debates are carried out, I'm not so sure, but the debate itself is useful. And I think that the question that Ritu is asking about, assigned at birth, the language around trans people, all of these are not really debates that we've had in real spaces as much as we had over, these various media. So the creation of the finding of lesbian women is still, I think it is a question that does not have an answer. The only those who have access find spaces. We still don't know how to reach out to a large majority of people. And I think that that's something that's becoming more and more and more difficult. The way that we could get up and go and reach out to somebody in Jalgaon and Nanded and here and there, it's very difficult for us to do it now. So I do recognize the difference from then to now, and it is yeah, I don't know how we are going to carry this work forward because the crises don't seem to end. Crisis is ongoing, continuous, more enhanced, different kinds all the time before us. I mean, this lockdown has shown us so many dirty sides of this society and so many problems with, which we all knew, but it's kind of exposed to the world. The safety of the home and so on and so forth. And the absence of the home in so many cases. So, there are
I think that, I mean, the last few years have been more difficult for everybody, but also I think there is something to learn more from what happened with the CA and RC protests, and the callousness, which was always there, but the fault lines and callousness, which has become so evident in these last 3 months. I think almost every group, but definitely this group, will have to rethink once again how to survive, because we have to make shifts in our languages and the way we function. And I think sometimes you just feel like you don't know where that shift will come from and how. But I do feel that we are in a time where things must shift. Otherwise, I think we'll be very wrong in not shifting. Yeah, it should implode actually.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was thoughtful. Any more queries, comments? How has Labia Network interacted worked with other movements like left, anti-caste, sex workers' rights? Nihan asked.
I think with the left progressives, at least via the women's groups that we started working with and the human rights groups, we have interacted always, and they have been part of the progressive groups in the city. First the women's groups and then the progressive groups in the city, and the human rights groups we have always sort of interacted with. And I think with anti-caste, with sex workers groups again, because it has been a crucial part of understanding and learning. When, in Bombay also, again, it has very connected to the city of Bombay. 2005, when the bar dancers were banned, and 2004, when the dance bars were stopped and, dancing was banned in the bars, we were very much then part of the whole struggle to talk about the rights of bar dancers. And so that's the point actually when not just the feminist groups, but also a group like Labia, our politics around both sex work and caste sort of came to the fore. So in fact, for both the, anti-caste and sex work, I think at that point, they were very much, especially in the city, almost against each other. And it has taken a long journey to find those places of conversations between the debates, because they happened very explosively at that point.
But we have had since then a lot of conversations with the sex work groups, and we've had a lot of solidarity and allyship with each other and a connection. And with also with the anti-caste struggles, I think more and more conversation. But still somewhat.
One thing that we're still trying to, I think we'll have to figure out a way of doing this for ourselves, as all of us, and with the progressive groups as well. That anybody with a queer identity need not necessarily be an ally. Is something that we'll have to teach a lot of our progressive groups to, understand, unravel as we go along. That who can you partner with and who you should not partner with is something that is still so for example, everybody thinks today that we have to talk about queer issues. We have to have that token LGBT whatever somebody over there. So now we have to move to the next step to say that it's not LGBT. You have to talk of the politics of gender and sexuality, and only a certain kind of politics should find space here. Not all identity-based politics can find space in progressive politics. Is something that I think is the next step. So I do think that we've moved in terms of recognition of, and that's a contribution across the country of various groups and people across the country, that today all progressive spaces recognize that there, I mean, what I was saying that the early paper was of rights are human rights, that is now a reality. That now everybody has to talk of women, LGBT, whatever they understand from it, they have to include everyone. But the inclusion now, the terms of the inclusion have to shift, is where our next conversation with the progressive groups.
And I think for our own understanding also, I think there's been a tremendous shift in starting talking about just sexuality and gender. But it's not just talking about gender and sexuality that's grown. And I think also because we're in Bombay, that communal politics were very much part of it. But also seeing over these last 25 years the connect between caste, gender, and sexuality together. To say that it is impossible to talk about gender and sexuality without talking about caste in this country, I think has been also one of the shifts in understanding over time, which has to be taken more and more strongly everywhere else.
I think similarly, disability.
Yeah.
Which is again not an engagement. I mean, apart from, so it is a theoretical engagement, but our active engagement with groups working with people with disabilities is still something that we have to do more and more. But that's, yeah.
Okay, Anish has a question. Anish, you want to say it?
Yeah, I think I can say it also. Hi, everyone. How are you? Very lovely to see you after so many days.
Yeah.
But no, I actually really wanted to ask, how do you think the way people stumble onto labia has changed over the years? And also building upon Bihan's question on how labia's focus on building solidarities with progressive movements and women's groups and human rights groups has allowed it to be useful in crises like Mumbai Pride, I think as a lot of bachas, I think a lot of young queer people stumbled onto labia like during Mumbai Pride in like really difficult situations, and you're like, we don't know where to find a lawyer. We don't know what like a sedition case is. We don't know all of these things, right? And clearly established queer organizations simply did not have any of that reach. In fact, so many of them, even the established ones, were turning to you only to find out lawyers for the opposing side. So how do you think like the way people stumble onto labia has changed, and how these sort of solidarities have created labia as a very atrangi space in a way?
Very what? Atrangi? What do you mean atrangi?
You wouldn't expect, no? Like queer group ke paas kab jate ho? You don't go there just for support. You go for lawyer also, you go for human rights also. The different ways that one approaches a queer group, apart from like standard definition queer group,
So actually, I mean, I'm no Chanika's anti-talk on this, but I think that there has been, I see it because I've also been part of Forum for a few years till I left it about 10 years ago. But I think that I see it, and I think that this is where I also see a difference between Chanika and me and our generation. I think, but I sort of, because, I came in the 90s, I then caught that a lot. And I don't know if younger people can, because there's a different kind of networking. What we have today is networking. You know, a lot of people are very networked. So, and there's this and connections. Okay, fine. Whatever. But I think what a lot of one had in collectives, and I think this is how I see labia as a collective also. It's not necessarily a place of friendship, though there is friendship, but it is a place of camaraderie of a kind, a personal and political camaraderie. And when I look at the kind of contacts one has through this work, but also through feminist groups and other people, there's a kind of camaraderie which has enabled this thing. That way, you know, you're not worried that I can give this person's number to somebody or not. You know that they're committed to this. You know that, you know, Chanika can be called up at any point of time and she will respond to something. Is not something many of us can do with many people, you know. And that you will, I mean, even in the early days when people were heading off to Bilaspur to find somebody, would be calling people in the Narmada NBA and saying, you know, actually, do you have anybody there in that town, you know, and they would give us contacts. So there was that connection, camaraderie, which was kind of different. And I think all these years of working has strengthened that. I don't know if it answers it, but I'm just feeling that that's how it has worked.
No, I also want to answer it a little differently, Anish, that I think that for new people in this city at least, labia is painted in a very bad way. I don't think people come to labia unless they have a problem. Unless they're in a soup and they need to reach somewhere. And two reasons. I mean, one is, of course, the bad mouthing that happens is one story, but the second is that we have a very low profile. I don't think that we ourselves put ourselves out so much. And the reasons for that are again internal as well as our own recognition of how much we can do. So we've had a phone line for the longest time, but we don't advertise it too much. We don't talk about it too much because we cannot take on more work. We are not in a position to reach out that much. But because we are connected and we as a collective, we are connected to various other groups and networks. That's where what Charles is saying works. That because of those connections, we can find people. So yeah, I think both these things are there. That we are, and I like to talk of what we spoke at the 20 years. That if you look back, then I feel that this group has, our role is essentially to create the soil. I don't think we can create beyond that. A volunteer of this nature, which is completely working on people's commitment to actually challenge structures. That is all that it is working on. It has nothing else with it. All we can do is do our small acts that turn something somewhere and hope that many of these kinds of small acts create a soil from which something grows later on. And I totally, I mean, we all kind of agreed with this lovely thing that one feminist science studies person, Salah, had written, which so aptly describes the kind of work that we can do. I mean, imagining anything more than that would be imagining something fancy and fake. But talking about, yes, we just do quietly do whatever little we can. Yeah, to be the earthworm in the soil is what we are being. And you turn the soil and create it and make it ready.
Thank you. Yeah. So any more comments, questions? Anish says, thank you. This was beautifully put. I like the idea of this low profile, of allowing for more powerful work being made possible. Absolutely. Yeah, I do agree to that also.
Since, we haven't really met people in a really long time and like most of us have been stuck, those of you who wouldn't mind turning on your video so that we can say hi, we would all love to just see everybody. It's been just really long. Hello.
Hi, Charles.
Hi, hello, hello. Hi, Natasha. Hi, this is so lovely.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Hasina.
It's nice to actually see actual people here. And I had actually forgotten about it, and I had turned off my internet, and somebody reminded me. So thank you to that person. Really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. It's so lovely to see everybody.
We have an LBT party tonight.
Yes.
Zoom. If you want to come and join, please welcome. Send you the link.
Send us the link.
Anyway, thank you so much. We learned a lot from you, Labia. Like we have learned, and we are still learning. And it was a wonderful conversation. The questions were amazing. The conversations, and emotional, political, and so many things to think about. And thank you so much. And with Rumi and Sunil, we'll talk about Lesbed and Rahi and their activism in Karnataka, Bangalore, and other places of mostly South India. And so we hope to see you next Saturday.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
It's so lovely. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.